And then think about why you're taking time to participate in this session today. As part of this Introduction to Buddhism course, the session on the 5 paths. What's your own motivation? Motivation. What's your intention? Intention. Your long-term aim. So try to especially relate that to the aspiration of bodhicitta, the wish to become fully enlightened in order to free all sentient beings from suffering. So then we can read the four immeasurable thoughts once through and then contemplate on the meaning of those. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to abide in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and hatred or anger towards enemies. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have happiness and its causes. I myself will cause them to have these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free from these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to be never separated from the happiness which is totally beyond suffering. So it means the happiness of liberation from samsara and full enlightenment. May they never be separated from this. I myself will cause them to never be separated from this. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. So take a moment, try to generate those four immeasurable thoughts, attitudes of equanimity, love, compassion, and immeasurable joy. And then we can recite this verse of praise to Shakyamuni Buddha as a way of going for refuge. Seeing Shakyamuni Buddha, you can visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front if you like, or His Holiness Dalai Lama, or any other object of refuge. And reflect how they themselves embody, Shakyamuni Buddha himself or His Holiness themselves embody the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And generate the two causes of refuge, wise fear and the suffering of lower realms, the suffering of samsara, the suffering of all sentient beings, wishing to be free or to alleviate that. And then strong faith that the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, and one's own teachers have the ability to protect oneself and ultimately guide one to release from these fears. Compelled by great compassion, taught the sacred Dharma to dispel all wrong views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. And then we can recite the refuge and bodhicitta prayer too, maybe in Tibetan, since it looks like most in the audience are Tibetans. Sangye chodan jaju bodhi dani kyabzu chi dagi jinzo gi pe tsona ki dola benju sangye droba sho sangye chodan zogi chodan ma jaju bodhi dani kyabzu chi dagi choshi gi pe tsona ki Dola Penche Sange Rupa Sho Sange Chodan Sogi Chodam La Janju Badu Dali Kyabzu Chi Dagi Joshi Jibe Zonan Ki Dola Penche Sange Rupa Sho. I especially think strongly that by engaging in this session, may I quickly achieve the state of full enlightenment in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to sentient beings, and especially to free all sentient beings from the oceans of samsaric suffering. Therefore, I'll engage in this session. Okay. So, mm, mm, I think when we think about the suffering of sentient beings, how so many people are hungry, thirsty, and depressed, and suffer from different kinds of, addiction to drugs and alcohol, or to addiction to relationships, or to pornography, or power, influence, fame. Even people very powerful, wealthy, they quite suffer quite a lot. And then, of course, people in very impoverished regions, from very poor families, very poor areas. And when there's drought or floods, think of all the people in Pakistan who lost their homes. Millions and millions of people lost their homes, lost their businesses, fields destroyed, their livestock killed by the floods. Then people, of course, in war-torn regions like Ukraine, Syria. And think of all the people suffering, and that's just the human beings. Then think of all the animals, suffering. So many, many more animals, um, yeah, suffering, hunger, cold, heat, afraid of being eaten by other animals, and their whole lives just living in complete confusion, having no idea really what's going on, just acting completely based on instinct. And then that's just the creatures that we can see, not to mention, hell beings, hungry ghosts, gods, demigods. So when you think of all the suffering beings, it's natural. And then we think, of course, of our own difficulties, our own challenges, hardships, our own suffering, worries, fears. Then it's natural to, want to do something to be free from suffering. And yeah, especially as adults, we probably tried many things in our lives to be free from suffering. Go to nice restaurants, get a good job, get good partners, hang out with cool friends, wear nice clothes, go to different places, go dharamsala and so forth. But usually we can find some temporary happiness, enjoyment, of course, we need that. But most of the things we do, they don't really lead to like lasting satisfaction, lasting freedom from all the different things that bother us, that make us suffer. So yeah, I mean that's the Buddha taught. And so then what we need to look for, well, is there, I mean, ask the question, is there really a way to be completely free from suffering in such a way that we don't suffer ever again? Is that even desirable? Um, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, but that's the kind of question that compelled Prince Siddhartha to leave the palace and um, you know meditate as a mendicant by the Niranjan River. Um, so his answer is that yes, it is possible to be free from suffering ultimately. Why is that? Is because all of the suffering arises from our minds, and then through the force of karma, things happen to us. And what is it, what is it that causes, because where does suffering exist? It doesn't exist like outside, in our room around us. It doesn't exist, on the street or in the air, on the ground or something. It exists in our minds. It's in our minds that suffering, we have the experience of suffering. Suffering isn't something else than an experience, like in our minds. Um, So then we have to look, at our minds to see how our minds work to answer the question: is it possible to be ultimately free from suffering? So what the Buddha, discovered, which is very, very difficult to see without, a teacher, um, is that, there's a fundamental flaw in the way that we perceive things, the way we think about things, the way we grasp at things as existing. And that is, that we exaggerate the kind of reality of ourself, exaggerate the kind of the way that we as a person exist, the way other people exist, the way things exist. We think all those things exist from their own side, independently, by their own power. This is the object of negation of the Prasangika, Madhyamaka Prasangika school. So, and it's because of this fundamental kind of reification, this exaggeration of the way things exist independently. Then we exaggerate the, separateness between I. We think, I am real. I just am there, just the way I am, just the way I perceive myself. And then we strongly exaggerate how that other things are separate from us, other. And then the things that are other, we divide into things that appear as attractive, and those are unattractive. Things that appear as attractive to us, we think not only just they appear as attractive to me, but they really are attractive from their own side, independently of my perception. They're inherently attractive by their own power. And then we generate desire for those things. We think, well, if that thing is attractive and it by its own side, from its own side, it gives me pleasure, then if I can have that, then I'll be eternally happy. You know, it's a total misconception. And if other things are that appear as unattractive, it's not just my perception, not just a projection, not just the way I label them, but really from the thing's own side, it really is unattractive, disgusting, disturbing to me. Until it's totally destroyed, I'm totally away from it, never to meet it again. I'll never be happy. So then we generate attachment for things we're attracted to, aversion to things we're repulsed by. And then that leads us into all these contaminated karmic actions through the force of fundamental ignorance, and then attachment and anger that grow out of that ignorance. So this is the kind of primary thing the Buddha taught. That's why in the verse of praise that His Holiness Dalai Lama recites at the beginning of almost every teaching, is praising the Buddha, out of compassion, seeing the suffering of sentient beings, wanting to free them. Then what does the Buddha do? He teaches the truth of, says the sacred Dharma, but it really means, the ultimate truth. Pampe Dani. Because Planki Tukshin is the Dawa Tamje Bombay chair in order to refute all views. Dawa Tamje Bombay chair. Pampe Dani Dunze Pa. Pampe the ultimate Dharma, the sacred Dharma, Tamba, Gen Tamba, that's both the meaning of like sacred or the meaning of Tondam Tempa, the ultimate truth, kind of. So, in order to refute all wrong views, in short, the Buddha taught emptiness and dependent arising. Um, so, how does this relate to the five paths? It's not just enough to understand like the object of negation, the kind of ignorance that causes us to suffer, and that the realization of emptiness or selflessness, according to the lower schools, that is the way to refute that. But it's important to understand more specifically how we progress in our levels of realization. The depth and the strength of our realization of selflessness, how we develop that more and more and more until we can actually abandon all the afflictions, the afflictive obscurations, or I should say all the obscurations. There's two kinds of obscurations, mudrip and shidrip. The afflictive obscurations and the knowledge obscurations. So it's the five paths are really about, how we first enter the kind of the path. It was an actual path, and then how we progress through those. Basically, mainly, of course, we're developing all positive qualities of renunciation. To more and more degree, we're developing all the different positive qualities of renunciation, bodhicitta, loving kindness, generosity, pure morality, meditative concentration, wisdom, and so forth. But it's primarily the development of wisdom supported by either renunciation or by bodhicitta, but primarily the realization of selflessness. that we develop more and more, and thereby eventually um, totally abandon from the root, the root cause of samsara, the the and the root of the afflictive emotions, and for well for what do you say, someone on the, well, you can say the Hinayana, but that's quite derogatory term. So it's better to say the path of what is it? Because I know you say it very often, I don't, it doesn't come to mind. The path of individual liberation, pratimokshayana. You can say the pratimokshayana. That covers both the hearers and the solitary realizers, the Nyento and the Rangya. So their main object of abandonment is the afflictive obscurations. So it's by abandoning the afflictive obscurations that one achieves mere liberation from samsara, nirvana. But only by abandoning even these subtle sort of um, obscurations in the mind, the shidru, or the knowledge obscurations. I'm not sure which, probably in Tibet House, especially in Geshe Dorje Damda's course, the master course, there's probably some standard terminology for like shidru, nyudru. So, but I don't know it, so I'm just using what I'm familiar with. But anyway, if you want to throw out the other terms, please feel free. Um, but for a bodhisattva, they aspire to become fully enlightened, achieve the mind which is completely free of any obscurations to knowing whatsoever, so that they can know perfectly how to benefit all sentient beings. So they have to abandon. So on the bodhisattva path, the main object of abandonment is the knowledge obscurations. But in either case, only when those obscurations are completely abandoned in such a way that they'll never arise again, then one's achieved either, this the path of no more learning is the fifth path, the path of no more learning of the vehicle of what is it, individual liberation, or the path of no more learning of the Mahayana Bodhisattva path. Anyway, so that's what we're going to discuss today, is these five paths. How we enter the path. The first path is the path of accumulation. Then how we progress through those on up to the path of preparation, the path of seeing, path of meditation, and then finally the path of no more learning. Yeah, so I've made a little PowerPoint slide, and I'll share that now. We can go through the five paths. I'll try to keep my talk, well, maybe I'll try to go through the whole thing in just 30 minutes and then leave 30 minutes to talk, but I mean for question and answer. But at least I'll leave 15 or 20 minutes for questions at the end. But if you do have any burning questions on any one of the slides, you're welcome to type it in the chat, and I can make sure I cover it. Okay. So the five paths. This is according to sutra, right? There's also, don't get confused. There's also in Tantra, there's also a separate five paths, but that's something completely different. So the five paths according to the sutra vehicle. So I'm going to present it under 8 headings here. First of all, what is a path? Then how to divide the paths. Or actually, I changed that to divisions of the paths, but come to it. So what are the divisions of different paths, different ways of dividing them? Then the actual five paths, the path of accumulation, the Tsolam, path of preparation, Jorlam, path of seeing, Tonlam, path of meditation, Gomlam, path of no more learning, Miloblam. And then finally, the way of progressing on the paths, progressing through the paths. It's my favorite topic. And so this is all based on the presentation of Salam. And like in Sarah J Monastery, we spend the third year of the Geshe Studies program studying 3 different topics. Dun is the 70 topics, is like the main topics of the Abhisamaya Alamkara. And then Drupta, or tenets. We study the main 4 different tenet schools, according to the Gelugpa in Buddhism. And then the third topic is the Salam, grounds and paths. Sa is grounds, Lam is paths. So this presentation of the 5 paths, I based it on Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen's Salam text. It's a very nice little text. Yeah, I do say so. Although I know Geshe Dorje Damdrul probably bases his presentation on Pension Son and Dragpa's text. So you get a little alternative here. And they are a little different. Maybe if there's time, I'll speak a little bit one of the main differences later on. So, okay. So first of all, what is a path? So let's go to the next slide. I have to get this box out of the way. Okay. So what is a path? So one of the little debates in the monastery is like, debating the difference between, isn't a path like something you walk on, to go somewhere? Isn't it like on the ground and outside of a person? So here, when we talk about path, we mean like a spiritual path, right? It's something that's actually a realization in a person's mind stream. So, but first of all, let's just read here. Path and ground from within the grounds and paths are synonymous. So when we talk about path or lam and sala nisuchebe sa, uh, the grounds from within grounds and paths, those mean the same thing. So we say salam, actually sa in that case, the sa in that case and lam are donjik, one meaning. So first I give the definition of ground from within grounds and paths, like salam nisuchebe sa. So the reason for saying that ground from within grounds and paths is because in Buddhist philosophy, there's a definition of the four elements, sachu me lung, earth, water, air, fire. So it's to distinguish like salam nisu chebe sa from sachu me lung shebe sa from yeah. So yeah, I better say it in English, make sure. So to differentiate the ground from within grounds and paths from the earth or the ground within the division of the four elements, earth, water, air, fire, because in Tibetan the term is the same. So the definition of the ground from within grounds and paths is a clear realization of one who has entered a path that serves as a basis for the many good qualities that are its effect. So you can see where they say ground. So just as like the external ground, it's the basis for all the good things that grow, all the crops, all the trees, all the flowers, all the animals, all the people. It's the basis for all these things, which are effects of their being ground. So like that, when we talk about, the ground from within grounds and paths, it's a clear realization. Actually, clear realization and ground and path here are all one meaning. But it's a clear realization, so obviously it's a consciousness, and it's always a mental consciousness. Actually, it's yeah. I think you can say. Well, I'll say yeah. Here, so you get in the different schools. According to Chetamawa Loop, what is it, Vaibhashika school? There probably are. Yeah, I'm not sure actually. Are there sense consciousness that are paths? Maybe, but definitely according to like the Madhyamaka schools, paths, except for in the mind of a Buddha, in the mind of a sentient being, a path is always a mental sense consciousness, right? So mainly we're talking about mental consciousness here. A clear realization of one who has entered a path. So we'll talk about what it means to enter a path later, but basically it means you enter a path, either the path of individual liberation or the Mahayana path, or the Bodhisattva yana, at either when you generate either uncontrived renunciation or when you achieve uncontrived bodhicitta, then you enter a path. So it's basically a clear realization in one who has entered a path, and it serves as a basis for the many good qualities and all the later realizations you generate that are its effects. So that's the ground from within the grounds and paths. And then a path is so this is the textbook definition. An exalted knower. Actually, I think exalted knower. Yeah. Here it means basically the same as clear realization. An exalted knower which is conjoined with the uncontrived intention of renunciation, right? So any path, it's conjoined with, it means in Tibetan is zimba. It's conjoined with or supported by or accompanied by uncontrived renunciation. So really renunciation, so here uncontrived renunciation means um, now sometimes we have renunciation. We really think about the faults of samsara. We aspire to be free from samsara, but it's contrived. We have to put effort into generating that. Uncontrived renunciation means when you habituate your mind so strongly, your understanding becomes so unshakable and clear of all the faults of samsara, right? And you have unshakable sort of understanding of the benefits of liberation and the possibility of and the benefits of liberation from samsara, that day and night you have continuously arising and spontaneously arising without effort, this wish to achieve liberation from samsara. This is the definition is usually based on this verse. Actually, it's a couple verses in the three principal aspects of the path by Tsongkhapa Lamson Namsun, where it says Nyinsin Kundu Tarpa Dunyalo, Juna Desing Yejung Tiabalaos. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a path. So basically, it's an exalted knower in an exalted knower in a person's continuum, which is accompanied by or conjoined with the uncontrived intention of renunciation. So now the divisions of the paths. You can see there's quite a few here, but it's not so complicated. So first, we can divide into two. So division into two according to motivation. So I already mentioned this. There's the paths of individual liberation, and say, because Sotargi Lam, or Jamsa Senpai Lam, the Bodhisattva paths. So usually, like I said, they usually say Tetmenki Lam and Tekchenki Lam, Hinayana paths and Mahayana paths. But for people who follow the Theravada tradition, they feel like that's quite derogatory because it is saying they're kind of lower or lesser, so it's not so nice to use. So with His Holiness encourages us to use like the Pradimokshayana and Bodhisattvayana, or paths, the vehicle or paths of individual liberation. So the paths of individual liberation, then what are they? And how are they distinguished by motivation? So they're the paths of those whose motivation is seeking liberation from samsara, primarily for oneself alone, right? So primarily one's looking at one's own suffering and thinking, I really want to be free from the suffering as much as possible. It's not that people, following the, like the Theravada teachings. Well, yeah, maybe leave that aside. But it's not that someone on the following the what do you say, the vehicle of individual liberation. That of course they have compassion. They meditate on the four immeasurables. They have very strong compassion, even compassion observing all sentient beings. They have the wish to free all. They have the wish that all sentient beings be free from suffering. But generally, they don't primarily take that on as a personal responsibility. Of course, they would like to, all sentient beings to be free, and I'm sure they would want to contribute to it. But it doesn't become like their primary aim that I myself will free all sentient beings from suffering, because largely it's considered like not a realistic aim. So the primary aim is to free themselves from the suffering of samsara. Right? And the entrance, so then the entrance to the path of individual liberation, so the entrance to this path is the development of uncontrived renunciation, right? To enter the bodhisattva path, also one has to generate uncontrived renunciation at the time one enters the bodhisattva path. But in addition to renunciation, one also generates bodhicitta. That'll just come below. So this path, the path of individual liberation, can be completed in as little as 3 ordinary lifetimes, right? And then the kind of a long time would be 100 lifetimes. But it's compared to the bodhisattva path, it's much, much, much shorter. It takes much less time to complete. And then it can be further divided into 2, primarily according to a person's disposition, right? So there's the hearer paths and the solitary realizer path, or Nyentu Kilam and Ransange Kilam. So the hearer paths, hearers are primarily like the etymology, it's a little bit complicated, but generally it's for people, some people like to be around others a lot. They like to practice Dharma together with other people, with friends. And they're a little lazy, so they like to receive a lot of teachings, listen to teachings again and again. So for someone who has a disposition to follow the hearer path, in their final lifetime, they still depend upon receiving teachings from Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or others, on listening to teachings. So they listen a lot. And then they like to practice, in a community, in groups with other people. Whereas some people, you can see, they prefer to do things on their own, you know. When they go, they like to go places alone. They like to be alone. When they meditate, they like to meditate alone. And so in their final lifetime, before they achieve liberation, they also make strong prayers, that they can achieve liberation from samsara in a place and at a time when there are no Buddhas. Not because they don't like Buddhas, but because they want to do things independently. And in that final lifetime, they don't receive teachings. Anyway, that's not so important for us. Next, the Bodhisattva path. So there's the path of individual liberation, which include both here and solitary realizers. And then there's the paths of bodhisattvas. So this is our main aim. Well, I don't, most who follow Tibetan Buddhism follow the Dalai Lama. Inspired of this. So the path, so what's the motivation? It's the path of those seeking full enlightenment. So yeah, the state of having an omniscient mind, a mind completely free of all obscurations, and having especially perfected the six perfections, perfect generosity, morality, patience, concentration, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. So meaning having perfected every positive quality, abandoned every fault, which is not the case if one has completed the path of individual liberation. So for those aspiring to achieve full enlightenment for their own welfare, no, altruistic, with an altruistic motivation, to achieve the welfare of all sentient beings, primarily. Oneself, not so important. I'm only one person in this world of 7 billion people. The other 7 billion, 7 billion people are much more important than me. So in order to achieve the welfare of all these 7 billion people, what is the best thing I can do? Achieve enlightenment, right? So it's the path of those seeking full enlightenment in order to free all sentient beings from suffering. That's the motivation, the bodhicitta motivation. So the entrance to this path is the development of uncontrived bodhicitta. Again, bodhicitta that now we sometimes we have, a little bit kind of something like bodhicitta, not real bodhicitta, but something like bodhicitta. When we make effort, we can sincerely generate the wish, may I become enlightened in order to free all sentient beings. But it doesn't just happen like while we're eating our breakfast or while we're walking and talking or in our dreams. It's something we have to put effort into. So at the time when, it's uncontrived, it spontaneously arises due to our deep understanding of the suffering of all sentient beings and our profound wish to, do something about it, whatever we can. Then when that attitude arises day and night, spontaneously, without effort, then, then we achieve uncontrived bodhicitta. To have that arise, we have to generate actually single pointed concentration, shine. Actually, in Tibetan is, no, shine is Tibetan, sorry. Calm abiding in English, calm abiding. Yeah, very single pointed, very focused mind. So to complete the bodhisattva path requires much longer time. 3 countless great eons. I won't go into what a countless great eon is, but it's millions and millions of years. So it requires very, very, very long time according to the sutra system. Thank goodness there's a tantric path, which you can do much quicker, but we won't talk about that now. So these are the divisions of paths: the path of individual liberation and the bodhisattva path. Into. And then more divisions of paths into the 5, which I already mentioned. So these 5, they're the same 5 paths, whether you're talking about the path of individual liberation or the path of bodhisattvas. They both contain, they're mainly structured around these 5 paths: the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So this is what we'll spend the rest of our time talking about, these one by one. I'm sorry I have to talk quite fast to finish everything I'm supposed to talk about. This is a big topic to present in an hour and a half, and we took 20 minutes just on the motivation because it's important to, generate a virtuous attitude. But here I should say, because I'm sure Geshe Dorje Namro points out quite regularly, the mantra from the Heart Sutra, Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhisattva, that expresses these 5 paths. Tayata is just like a preliminary. Gate Gate, they express the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. Paragate expresses the path of seeing. Parasamgate expresses the path of meditation. Bodhi Swaha, the path of no more learning. Okay, so first, the path of accumulation. So with regard to each path, I am going to go through these 5 different aspects. The etymology, what's the meaning of the name of the path? The definition is quite it's a textbook definition, so it doesn't help us understand it that well in this case. The divisions of that path, the type of realization, so the way in which one realizes emptiness on that path, and then what's the main object to be abandoned on that path. So I'll talk about those 5 kind of characteristics in relation to each of the 5 paths. So first, the path of accumulation. So again, this is the first one. What is at what point do we, so now we're ordinary beings. I mean, I don't know, I am. I don't know all of you. Hopefully some of you are bodhisattvas. If so, please step in and correct me for anything. But so, we're an ordinary being, just, trying to practice Dharma as best we can, go for refuge, take refuge vows, attend teachings, do different practices every day, but we're ordinary beings. So at what point do we enter the path, the first of the 5 paths, the path of accumulation? What did I say earlier? When we generate uncontrived renunciation, right? Or both uncontrived renunciation and uncontrived bodhicitta. So at that point, when we achieve this uncontrived renunciation, or that combined with uncontrived bodhicitta, then at that point, we enter, when we first generate one of those uncontrived attitudes, we enter the path of accumulation. So if it's just uncontrived renunciation alone, we enter the path of accumulation of the solitary, the path of individual liberation, or the path of hearer or solitary realizer. If we generate uncontrived bodhicitta, and just in addition to renunciation, then we enter the path of accumulation of the bodhisattva path or the Mahayana path. Okay. So then etymology, what is this path of accumulation? What does that mean? Basically, the path during which one begins to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom, right? To achieve to achieve the path of no more learning, or the enlightenment of the enlightenment of the individual liberation path, or the enlightenment of the bodhisattva path, we have to primarily, acquire these 2 collections, build up the 2 collections of merit on the one hand, which we do by practicing generosity, practicing pure morality, um, keeping vows, generating, good concentration, joyous effort, so forth. The whole method side of the path contributes to the collection of merit, or the collection of, yeah, method. And then the wisdom is primarily the mind meditating on selflessness, or according to the higher schools, emptiness. Right? So we only start accumulating those 2 when we actually enter the path of accumulation. And I mean, it's also called the path of accumulation because for the Vaibhashika school, actually, like even a person who's going to become a fully enlightened Buddha, they accumulate the collections over 3 countless great eons during this path alone, during the path of accumulation. According to the higher schools, it's different. I'll maybe mention that later, but according to the Vaibhashika school, and so the Abhidharma system, they accumulate, all of the accumulations of merit and wisdom happen during this path. Yeah, but not for the higher schools. I mean, like the mind only or the middle way schools. It's different. So the definition of path of accumulation is a clear realization of the doctrine. So all of the definitions of the 5 paths are like a realization of the doctrine. No, sorry, a clear realization of, and then they vary. There's the doctrine, and then you'll see the others below. I don't remember right offhand. But basically, here the doctrine we can think of as 2 ways. According to the Abhidharma system of the Vaibhashika school, it's referring more to the 4 noble truths, right? The Buddha's main teaching, the 4 noble truths. So when they say, it's at this point that we generate, a sort of introductory level realization of the 4 noble truths. A valid mind, valid cognizer, realizing the 4 noble truths, conceptual consciousness. For the higher schools, they'll emphasize more the realization of selflessness or emptiness. But the question comes, can a person be on the path of accumulation and not realize emptiness? I'm sure some of you in the audience know, but just strain your minds, or I don't know, generate your own answer. What do you think? Can a person be on the path of accumulation and not have realized selflessness or emptiness, according to different schools? So according to the higher schools, yes. There's 3 divisions of the path of accumulation: the small, middling, and great. A person on the small path of accumulation can have not realized emptiness yet. But once from the middling onwards, the middling and great path of accumulation and on up, one definitely has to have realized emptiness. So then the type of realization, so if one, assuming one has realized selflessness on the path of accumulation, what kind of realization does one have? Is it non-conceptual or conceptual? One has, okay, someone's requesting to annotate the shared content. I approve. Ale, you want me to? Okay, great, cool. I can annotate. So one has a conceptual realization. On the path of accumulation and the next one, the path of preparation, one only has a conceptual realization of, I'm saying selflessness here because that's to include all four schools. According to, like, well, let's say according to the Prasangika Madhyama school, the middle way consequentialist, it has to be a realization of emptiness. According to all the lower schools, it can be either of emptiness or of uh, like the selflessness of persons. So like for the Vaibhashika, they don't use the term Dombani. They don't use the term emptiness. They just use the term Ganzigidame, the selflessness of persons. So to include them in the definition, we say selflessness, but it means different things for the different schools. So the type of realization on the path of accumulation, in short, is a conceptual realization of selflessness based on calm abiding, as opposed to based on special insight. So they haven't yet generated special insight, realizing selflessness. They've only achieved a mind of calm abiding, realizing selflessness. What's the difference? Okay, look. So what's the object of abandonment? The path of accumulation. Ordinarily we don't really talk about objects of abandonment on the path of accumulation because it's not like here. So in the way we're talking here, it's not like really something they abandon, but it's more like how are they deficient such that they haven't achieved? Why haven't they achieved the path of preparation? The reason is because they have an inability to generate the wisdom of meditation. So within the three, hearing, contemplation, and meditation, right? There's the wisdom of hearing, which we're generating now as we listen to, Dharma talk about Dharma. There's the wisdom of contemplation, which we generate as we think about the Dharma. And then there's the wisdom of meditation, which we generate only once we've achieved shine, calm abiding, single pointed concentration. So on the path of accumulation, they have a wisdom of meditation, realizing, I believe, I could be mistaken, but they have I believe they have yeah, I have to check again, but I believe they have a wisdom of meditation realizing selflessness, but not one that has arisen from the union of calm abiding and special insight. So that is very important. The union of calm abiding and special insight. So basically what that means is, yeah, man, we're running out of time. Anyway, I'll just say this briefly since I already started. So when you've achieved at this point on the path of accumulation, imagine the person has generated calm abiding. So they can single-pointedly focus on any object of choice effortlessly for 4 hours or more without the mind wavering whatsoever. Amazing. And they can have that kind of mind realizing selflessness. Amazing. But when they go to analyze, but as they focus on emptiness or selflessness, the clarity of understanding of the meaning of selflessness, it gradually goes weaker. So to make it more clear and have a deeper or richer understanding, they need to switch to analysis, doing the analysis, going through the logic, the proof, to to prove, to establish, selflessness of persons or emptiness. But when they do that analysis, their stability of their concentration becomes weaker, right? So, and then when they concentrate again, their analysis becomes weaker. So when they achieve, so the meaning of achieving a union of calm abiding and special insight is that we alternate, the yogi alternates those two, single point of concentration on selflessness or analysis. And they keep alternating back and forth until they become a union, united such that when they analyze the meaning of selflessness, their concentration becomes even more stable. and yeah, more stable, more unwavering. And when they stabilize, focusing on it, their mind is so vivid and clear that the depth of their understanding of the meaning also becomes greater and more powerful. So instead of, whereas previously, this single point of concentration and analysis, they sort of work against each other. When you've achieved a union of calm abiding and special insight, then they mutually support and enhance each other. So at the point when one achieves a union of calm abiding and special insight, realizing selflessness, da 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 da. Oh, come on. Yeah. Oh, because I'm in the. I have to stop this annotation mode. Do that. Okay, click on annotate. Okay, now we go. Da 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 da. Come on. I know, here. You achieve the path of preparation, right? So at the point you achieve, or the yogi achieves a union of calm abiding and special insight, which you can also say just is special insight. I mean, that's what special insight is. When you achieve a union of calm abiding and special insight, realizing selflessness, at that moment you achieve the path of preparation. Okay? So, okay, so what is the etymology of the path of preparation? What are you preparing for? The path on which one primarily prepares to directly, or I mean, that's a common translation, it's direct perception, but I like to say perceptually or non-conceptually, realize selflessness. So on the path of seeing, the next one, the main characteristic of the path of seeing is that as opposed to having a conceptual realization of selflessness, one generates a yogic direct perceiver that perceptually or directly perceives or perceptually realizes, say different ways, um, selflessness or the Four Noble Truths according to Vaibhashya school. So that means they have a non-conceptual realization of the Four Noble Truths. So on the path of preparation, the yogi is preparing to, striving to, bring together all the causes and conditions to be able to generate that non-conceptual realization of selflessness or the direct perception of selflessness. So that's why it's called the path of preparation. The definition is a clear realization of the meaning. So the previous one was a clear realization of the doctrine. Here it's a clear realization of, oh, sorry, no, of the meaning. So that means it's kind of like the doctrine is kind of like, you can think of like the words, the explanations. On the path of accumulation, you understand more at the level of different explanations. Here at the path of preparation, it's like you kind of progress to understanding more deeply the meaning of the Dharma. And then I can't find my cursor now. And then the divisions, there are four: heat, heat, patience, and supreme Dharma. Yeah, we don't really have time to go through the differences. So if there's a question about it, we can come back if there's time at the end. So I'll just skip it for now. But basically, you can just think like through these four levels of the path of preparation, one's, realization of selflessness becomes stronger and deeper. It's still conceptual, but it becomes closer and closer to a non-conceptual realization. So it becomes more and more clear and powerful, long and short. And of course, one accumulates more and more merit as a support for that. So then the type of realization, again, is still a conceptual realization of selflessness that is a wisdom of meditation arisen from the union of calm abiding and special insight. Huh. It seems like I left out the object of abandonment here. Yeah. So again, it's not a real object of abandonment, but what one is trying to abandon at this point is one's ability to non-conceptually realize emptiness, right? To have a direct perception or to perceptually realize selflessness, right? Which is what you do when now, okay, now the path of seeing. So what's the mark of moving from the path of preparation to the path of seeing? Is generating a direct perception of emptiness. So this happens within one session of meditative equipoise. So this yogi who's moving from the path of preparation to the path of seeing, they do so like on the meditation cushion, wherever they're meditating, while they're chopping wood, some people apparently, um, or cleaning up, their guru's room. So, but in short, you imagine one is, in general, one is meditating on selflessness on the path of preparation at the very end of the path of preparation, the chocho, supreme dharma. So one has a very extremely powerful, conceptual realization of selflessness. And one has a lot of merit, one's completely habituated to it. One's done that again and again and again. And then it, 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 that, that conceptual mind realizing emptiness, it transforms into a non-conceptual mind, a yogic direct perceiver, a direct perception of emptiness. So that's something to think about a lot. It's quite difficult to imagine how that happens. And there aren't many examples, we can find of that happening, something similar to that, a conceptual understanding transforming into a non-conceptual understanding in our experience. Um, so it's definitely something to kind of, put some time into try to understand more deeply, ask people about how does that happen. But Dharmakirti gives some very good reasons why that is possible, which gives some insight into how it happens. But that's a huge, I mean, this is, yeah. So that's why it's called, so the path of seeing, why is it called the path of seeing? Because it's the path upon which one initially perceptually realizes or directly perceives selflessness, non-conceptually realizes selflessness, and the Four Noble Truths. So it's called the path of seeing because here it's like you see, just like, it's like the difference between someone telling you about this kind of delicious chocolate cake at this new cafe down the street, and you going in and seeing it on the table and seeing it and smelling it and touching it and tasting it. It's a completely different thing, right? So the path of seeing, before you only had a conceptual understanding or realization of selflessness. Here you directly perceive it non-conceptually for the first time. So it's called the path of seeing. The definition is a clear realization of the truth. So this is primarily referring to the Four Noble Truths. You have a direct perception of the Four Noble Truths here. And then the divisions are, here it's a little bit complicated, the divisions. So um, here the divisions are the unobstructed path of the path of seeing, the path of release of the path of seeing, the, wait, my annotate thing. So there's unobstructed path of the path of seeing, path of release, and then the subsequent attainment of the path of seeing, and then finally the meditative absorption, not included in either the unobstructed path or the path of release. So let's think about how this. So okay, so we were on the at the last moment of the path of preparation. We were meditating on emptiness with a conceptual mind, realizing emptiness. Then that kind of wonderfully transformed into a direct perception of emptiness. At that time, the first moment of the path of seeing is an unobstructed path. Unobstructed here is Barche Melam in Tibetan, right? Barche Melam. Barche is obstruction, me is unobstruction or not obstruction. So, but what it means is that first, a Barche Melam is always, or an unobstructed path, is one that acts as a direct antidote to the specific obscurations that are its objects of abandonment. So it means it's a very powerful mind realizing selflessness that directly refutes or eliminates, kind of annihilates, and makes it, it's like we have this deep realization of selflessness such that a certain level of, ignorance, a certain level of misconception, and the seeds of that are destroyed such that they'll never arise again, ever, right? So, so it's a mind, unobstructed path is this kind of yogic direct perceiver that directly destroys a certain level of ignorance, and objects of abandonment, which are specific to it. And then once, so it's kind of like equivalent of Actually, before this point, we don't have that ignorance in the mind anymore. So it's as if we've already thrown the thief out of the house, right? But we haven't shut the door behind the thief so that he can never come back. So the unobstructed path is like slamming the door and locking it behind the thief so that it can never come back. And then the path of release is like sitting down in the chair and having a cup of tea and saying, "Oh, I'm so glad that thief is gone." It's like the path. It's still a yogic direct perceiver. Um, it's still a mind directly realizing emptiness, but it's conjoined with kind of the sense of relief of having abandoned those objects of abandonment such that they'll never come. And it also, this path, it also realizes that one has generated that abandonment that was accomplished by the unobstructed path. Anyway, we don't have so much time to talk about all this now. It's very interesting, but if you're interested more, take a class in the grounds and paths, a Tibet house or some other place, right? And then so we can't stay in meditative absorption forever. Sometimes we have to eat and we have to go walk outside, stretch our legs and whatever. So at that time when we arise from meditative equipoise, then we arise into the mind of subsequent attainment, subsequent subsequent to that meditative equipoise. So these two, the path of the unobstructed path and the path of release, are always part of one session of meditation, right? One session of one yeah, of meditative equipoise. Then the subsequent attainment of the minds we have once we arise from that, and we see that all things are just illusions. They no longer appear the same. But then, to achieve the next path. So what's the next path? The path of meditation. How do we achieve that, right? So to achieve that, we have to again sit in meditative absorption on selflessness and strengthen and develop that so it's more powerful, so that it can abandon the next more subtle level of obscurations. So those kind of sessions of meditative equipoise are called meditative absorption, not included in the unobstructed path or the path of release. Right. So again and again, meditate again and again, and then once that mind, the mind meditating on selflessness becomes powerful enough to actually act as an unobstructed path, abandoning the next more subtle level of obscurations. Then we shift from the path of seeing to the path of meditation. So we'll come to that in just a second. So the type of realization here, remember, is a perceptual realization of selflessness or direct perception of selflessness. You can say it's a non-conceptual mind realizing selflessness, a yogic direct perceiver, primarily, right? There's others that are included in the path of seeing, but the primary one is this. And then the object of abandonment here is the intellectually acquired afflictive obscurations. So the objects of abandonment, it varies a little bit with the different schools, but we'll go according to what we consider the highest, the Prasangika Madhyamaka, the consequentialist middle way school. For them, the path of seeing, the objects abandoned on this path are intellectually acquired afflictive obscurations. That means they're not those that innately arise for every sentient being. Rather, intellectually acquired means they are sort of wrong views that we generate through studying mistaken philosophical systems. But there are some other objects of abandonment, but the main ones are these intellectually acquired afflictive obscurations. Okay, I see we only have 20 minutes left now. Well, no, 24 minutes left. Okay, my watch is a little fast. So, but we only have two, no, three more headings. But path of normal learning is easy. So now path of meditation. So what's the etymology? Why path of meditation? Why not path of uh, learning or something? So why is it called path of meditation? Because it's a path upon which one repeatedly meditates again and again. One meditates on one's perceptual realization of selflessness in order to abandon progressively more subtle levels of obscurations. So among the, yeah, well, so this path, compared to the path of seeing, the path of meditation lasts much longer. Why? Because it's the objects of abandonment are innately acquired. You see down here, uh, activate meditation pencil. Innately acquired afflictive observations. Innately acquired means they arise spontaneously since beginningless time. All sentient beings who haven't done any, are not on any path, they have them. And they're very, very, there's 9 different levels of subtlety. There's, um, you can say, well, so the great, great, middling, and small. And then with each of those, there's a great, middle, and small. So there's great, 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 middle, great, small, middle, great, middle, 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 small, small, great, small, middle, small, small. Small, small is the most subtle. Great, great are the most easy. So you can kind of think like washing, cleaning your clothes. Is usually the analogy used, like cleaning your clothes. Like if you spill some rasam and you smear some dal and you also get like mud on your shirt, what's the easiest to clean out of your shirt? The mud, right? Not too difficult to wash mud out of your shirt. It's just water and dirt, right? Easy. What's the next more difficult? So that's like the great level of obscuration. It's easy to clean out. What's the next more difficult? The dal, right? That's not so difficult. You wait for it to dry. You can crumble most of it off. The rest of it you wash out with a little soap. What's the most difficult? I said rasam. I'm not sure about rasam. Maybe grape juice is a better example. Grape juice, very, very difficult, almost impossible to clean out of, your white shirt. So that's like the dal is like the middle. Grape juice is like the most difficult. So they're progressively more and more difficult, more and more subtle levels of obscurations, which are more and more difficult to abandon from the mind. Thereby, we have to meditate on the path of meditation. Have to meditate again and again on this, with this a mind on selflessness. Sorry, with this yogic direct perceiver. We have to make it more and more powerful and support it for a bodhisattva. They support it with, the power of the method side of the path, the power of, practicing generosity more profoundly, practicing pure morality, practicing patience more profoundly, accumulating merit through, on the hero path or the path of solitary realizer. You can think they they generate more and more strong renunciation for samsara. So this, the wisdom realizing selflessness has to be supported by the method side of the path. So then the definition is a subsequent clear realization. So it's called subsequent because it's subsequent to the path of seeing. On the path of seeing, you already, perceptually realize emptiness. On the path of meditation, you just subsequent to that, you do that again, but again and again and again and more. Then the divisions. Okay, so here, this is according on the Bodhisattva path of meditation. Right? There's a solitary, there's a individual liberation path of meditation and the Bodhisattva path of meditation. So, but we're mainly concerned with the Bodhisattva path of meditation. There's the 10 bhumis, heard him, Sa Chu, the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. Um, so on each of those, each are related to achieving mastery over one of the 10 perfections. How many of you knew there are 10 perfections? They're not just 6. Right? What are the additional 10? The perfection of method, perfection of prayer, perfection of power, and perfection of exalted wisdom. Anyway, you can Google it. So on each of these successive bodhisattva grounds, the bodhisattva achieves complete mastery over one of the 10 perfections. And then also the difference between these 10 bodhisattva grounds is they abandon one level of the 9 rounds. Remember I said great, 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 middle, great, small, down to small, small. So they each abandon one of the 9 rounds of innately acquired obscurations, right? So you might ask, but there's 10 bodhisattva grounds and only 9 rounds of obscurations, so that doesn't match. Well, this is where there's a little difference between, I think there's a difference between Jetsunba's Yikja and Penchen Sonamdrakpa's Yikja. According to Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen's Yikja, of Sarah J. And the great level of obscurations, you actually divide into gross and subtle. So on the first ground, uh, there's on the first bodhisattva ground, actually the first part of the first ground is the path of seeing. And then the later part, the very end of the first ground, is the path of meditation. On that, at that time, one abandons just merely the gross, great um, objects of abandonment. And then on the second ground, one abandons the subtle, gross objects of abandonment. And then you just do the rest of the 8 on up. So it fits like that. So here, on the path of meditation, what's the type of realization? Again, a perceptual realization or a non-conceptual realization of selflessness. And then what are the objects of abandonment? What did I just talk about? The innately acquired, as opposed to on the path of seeing. Remember, it's intellectually acquired based on studying wrong tenets, wrong philosophical systems. Here it's innately acquired, just ones that have arisen spontaneously since beginningless time. Those are what's being abandoned, both afflictive and knowledge obscurations. All right. Okay, so now I have to finish in 2 minutes. So you have 15 minutes to ask questions. So now the path of no more learning, the end, right? So once you travel the whole path of meditation, how do you achieve the path of no more learning? Imagine you're at the end of the path of meditation. You see there's just these very extremely subtle obscurations left. Then you generate the yogic direct perceiver, realizing selflessness powerfully enough that you can abandon those. So you generate the unobstructed path. The last moment of the path of meditation is an unobstructed path of the 10th ground for a bodhisattva path. You generate that, and then in a moment you abandon those the small level of obscurations. At this point, it's just the afflictive obscurations. And then the next moment, you achieve the path of release. That path of release is the first moment of the path of no more learning. Right? So the first moment of the path of no more learning is a path of release. So why is it called the path of no more learning? Yes, there's nothing more to learn. You've done everything. You can take a big holiday, right? So the path upon which one has nothing further to realize and no more obscurations to abandon. The definition is an exalted knower that has abandoned the afflictive obscurations. Okay, I have to qualify that because that's according to, remember this definition is from Jesenchik Gyaltsen's Paths and Grounds text. That text is according to not the Prasangika Madhyamaka, but according to the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, the autonomous middle way school. So for the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, not easy to say, the autonomous middle way school, they say that, yeah, anyone who's achieved, sorry, that, yeah, I don't have time to explain, but basically they say that the final, remember, there's 2 kinds of obscurations, right? The afflictive obscurations and the knowledge obscurations. Which are more subtle? Knowledge obscurations, right? So according to the autonomous middle way school, the most subtle afflictive obscurations and the most subtle knowledge obscurations are abandoned at the same time. So anyone who's abandoned the afflictive obscurations, they achieve either the path of no more learning of the individual liberation vehicle or the path of no more learning of the bodhisattva vehicle. But according to the Prasangika school, it's different. For bodhisattvas, they abandon all of the afflictive obscurations on the 7th, well, on the 7th ground. Yeah, and then the 8th, 9th, on the 8th, 9th, 10th ground, they spend their time abandoning the knowledge obscurations. So this definition doesn't fit for the Prasangika. But anyway, it's a good start to know this definition. So the divisions are the hearers, solitary realizers, and the Mahayana path of noble learning. The types of realization, again, is a the perceptual realization of selflessness. Or Musum, 그래서 밤에 무슨 도바, 또 making doba. So yeah, perceptual or direct realization of selflessness, and then objects of abandonment, none, because they've abandoned them all. Right? That's why it's the path of normal learning. So just briefly, in 2 minutes. I mean, we can, from my side, we can go over a little bit. But so the way of progressing on the path. I basically said all this, but just it's very important to, if you want to meditate on the five paths, which we don't have time to do together, but in the future, if you'd want to meditate, it's very good to do. Uh, so this is, it's very helpful to think about this. How does one, first achieve the path of accumulation? Then from that, how does one move to the path of preparation? From that, how does one move to the path of seeing? Then to the, so we're going like this way, right? How do you move from one to the other? So let's just review. Um, um, so remember, we enter the path of accumulation when one generates uncontrived renunciation, or that with also bodhicitta. So we generate uncontrived renunciation of bodhicitta. We start accumulating a lot of merit. Try to meditate on emptiness with a conceptual mind. Then one enters the path of preparation when one's conceptual realization of selflessness is developed so that it becomes a special insight realizing selflessness. So remember, when there's a union of calm abiding and special insight realizing selflessness, at that point we generate the path of preparation. Then we meditate with that again and again and again until it becomes a non-conceptual, direct perception of selflessness. At that time, we enter the path of seeing. Then we meditate um, on that, on the path of seeing. We meditate, with a yogic direct perceiver. Meditate on selflessness with this direct perception or perceptual realization again and again and again until it's powerful enough to abandon the, the most gross level of um, of innately acquired obscurations. Yeah, here, innately acquired obscurations. Okay? At that point, we enter the path of meditation, and then we enter then we meditate on the path of meditation. We generate this more and more powerful levels of direct perception, understanding selflessness, until we abandon even the most subtle level of obscurations, whether afflictive or knowledge. At that time, we achieve the path of no more learning. And okay, so I wanted to say one final thing, just kind of general advice, is what's the point of, we might think, I don't have time to meditate all day, all week, all year. Even if I had time, I'm not sure I'd want to. I'm not sure I could do that. So why study all these five paths? By studying the five paths, because eventually, whether we want to achieve, freedom, complete freedom from the suffering of samsara, or we want to, be able to free all of the sentient beings from the infinite suffering of samsara, eventually we have to realize all these five paths. There's no other way, right? So and now we're human. We have intelligence. We've met the Dharma. We've met amazing teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Dorje Dandro, many other lamas and geshes. Um, and we exist at a time when the Buddha's teachings exist. When a time when this person who has really, he's gone through all these five paths, he's generated this path of no more learning, and he's taught it to others, and that teaching still exists. It's something extremely rare in the world. So now, even if we feel like, yeah, realistically, I can't develop those, but just by, we need to take baby steps, create the causes to be able to develop those in the future, in this life or in a future lifetime. So now, if we just think, oh, I leave it, I'm not interested, I don't need that, we're creating the cause to be separated from the Dharma. But if we take some interest, like all of you have for joining the session, it's excellent. And we just learn about these five paths. What are the differences between them? How do we move from one to the other? Then by learning about that, we create imprints on our mind to be able to achieve those in the future, right? It's like if you'd really like to go to like Venice in Italy, or I don't know, where's a really nice place to go? Maybe, huh, I can't come up. I think of the European places, maybe like the Grand Canyon in America. I'm American, so I can use American place. Like the Grand Canyon is really amazing, beautiful place. So you think I'd really like to go to America, go to the Grand Canyon in America, but I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay for the airfare or get a visa and stuff. But what's the first step? Just look on Google Maps, search for Grand Canyon, figure out, well, where is it? How do you get there? That's just by doing that, you start to kind of, get an idea about what it's like, how I might go there. And then gradually that can result in, you never know what's going to happen. Eventually, maybe you can go. So it's kind of like that. So that's why we should study the five paths. Okay, now any questions? The chat. Okay. I'm in the chat. Any live questions? There's not many people here today. Last time I did a Tibet House teaching, there were like 40, 50 people. But it was a shorter course. It's quite a long, stretched out course. Okay, Lekman, you have to ask a question. That's your responsibility as a moderator. To ask a question if nobody else does.
Uh, I request to all the participants if you have any questions or any doubts want to clear. As people are doing, man.
Debate me. Say, yes, Lexa, well, you said this, but, someone else says this. Why?
Tishitili, Tishitili, Shla, Tishitili, Lexula, really glad to attend this session. I don't have a question, but I really like when you said about the how can we how can we work on a meditation, like you say, easy to clean. You put the method or example how you clean the stain on a white shirt, like mud and then dal, and then you said the grab shoes is impossible. So I think that's the ignorance I was thinking on that time. It's really hard to wash that stain. So doing that need to be meditate and concentrate in our daily life. Thank you for that. And then another question is how you interact or how you come to know this such a profound teaching. It's just curiosity.
Me?
Yes.
Well, from studying at the monastery. I've been studying here a long time, so this is the kind of stuff, we discuss, and study, debate for years, years and years.
What makes you to what makes you, yeah.
Why I'm studying here? Um, well, basically because I've suffered quite a lot in life. So early part of my life, had different problems with different things, and saw that, yeah, not only me, but many other people suffer quite intensely. And so the early on when the little bit I learned about Buddhism, about how to meditate, how to think in different ways about things by using like Tonglen, a Lojong kind of mind training teachings, and just, the benefit of meditating on loving kindness, interdependence, dependent arising, I found very, very helpful, for my own state of mind. So then I wanted to learn more about meditation, then came to eventually, made it to Nepal, India, met Tibetan Buddhism, and then, did different practices, and learned so much, more philosophical explanation in Tibetan Buddhism is amazingly rich compared to other Buddhist traditions. So much rich explanations, which I found helpful, and also many, many different meditation techniques, that I found so useful. So at first, when I was a monk, I became ordained in 2021. I just wanted to meditate with the other like meditators above TCV and Dharamsala, or up above Bagsu. I didn't really want to come study. But then I realized after doing some retreats, you have to you know you have to understand a lot. to know with some confidence how to actually progress on the path to full enlightenment. It's a long path, you know? So, and if you want to travel that path, you need to study the works of people who've actually traveled it before, like Shantideva and Nagarjuna and, you know, Longchen Ramjamba, Tsongkhapa, Sakya Pandita. So it's important to study, you know, in depth the descriptions of you know, these great Buddhist masters of the past. And where do you go to study those? You at the you know, for at Gelugpa, you know, go to the Densa Sum. So that's how I ended up here.
Thank you for your sharing experience. I think what I get to know that I think a cause of or benefit to having a hard time in a life, challenge in the life, makes you go toward this path. I think we all are juggling um, day-to-day life. Um, I will try my best. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's one helpful thing we can remember, you know, when we're really having a hard time in life, you know, really struggling with things, to that kind of suffering, it's the maybe one of the most powerful causes to, you know, if we're Buddhist, to make us sincerely turn to the Buddha Dharma Sangha for refuge. You know, in my experience, that's when I most sincerely go for refuge, when I really kind of like utusung, you know, you really kind of don't know what else to do. Then you really, you know, go for refuge. So that's one, it's helpful to remember that's one, there's benefits of suffering. That's one benefit. And it doesn't last, you know, of course, suffering is impermanent. It's not going to last forever. It goes away eventually. But not all suffering, you should say. But one, I should say also, the grape juice analogy, it's not that it's impossible to wash grape juice out of the shirt. If you use really, really strong bleach, you can bleach it out, right? Um, and then two, it's not that if we don't do anything, we can't think, oh, suffering is impermanent. So like everything else, it's just, you know, everything else that's impermanent is going to go away eventually. It's specific instances of suffering, they arise and pass away. But overall, suffering it continually, you know, arises again and again, unless we generate the five paths.
Yeah, I think if there's any other question, otherwise I'll go.
Sure. Yeah, we can dedicate. Yeah, I think there's no other questions. And well, there's only 1 minute left, but yeah, so we can dedicate. Let's just think. Mm,
Tenzin Latsula, my last question is it's a Buddhism is really profound. Since I get to know, even though I was taking advantage of being raised in a Buddhist family, but I didn't know that I have to practice that. I just come to know that. It is, when you read the script, when you teach, when you listen, it's all talk about, free from suffering. Uh, it's really hard for the layperson to make a distinction. How we gonna, what are we doing right now? How we gonna get out from this path? Because we already made a choice. We know it's a really
yeah, lay path is fine also.
but then, like you said, for doing this bodhicitta path, you have to be dedicated. You have to be 101%. Then you will, go to the next step. So that's kind of,
You have to dedicate some time and energy, but you don't have to be an ordained person. I don't think I said that, but if I did, it was a mistake. So it's more like, well, I mean, it's like exercise, right? If you don't do any exercise, you're not going to be very healthy. If you do only 5 minutes a day, you'll be a lot more healthier than if you didn't do any. If you do 10 minutes a day, you'll be twice as healthy. You know, I mean, as far as your physical, you know, strength and kind of the health of your body, it'll be much better than if you didn't. If you're a triathlete and you're an Olympian and you spend all day every day just doing physical exercise, then you might, you know, you can be better than anyone else in the world at whatever you do, right?
right.
So monks and nuns, they're kind of like, you know, they should be trying to be like the Olympians of Dharma, you know, spending all their day and night. You know, most of us were not really because we're lazy, but you know, spend all, at least for myself, I'm very lazy. But but as a layperson, even you can make 10 minutes a day to spend on Dharma. And even all you do is just study what is do the just say mani mantras for 10 minutes a day with the understanding of the meaning of mani mantras. That's amazing. That's excellent. How many other people in the world can do that? And that will benefit your mind so much. Even if you just sit and with a virtuous motivation, watch your breath for 10 minutes a day. You're making a lot of progress compared to all the lifetimes in samsara when you never met Dharma and never did any Dharma practice. And that little bit of progress you make, like even if it's not every day, even if it's a few times a week, that will continue in future lifetimes. So just whatever you can do, rejoice in that and don't get too caught up in all that you can't do. If myself, even even I've studied here in the monastery 19 years, it's kind of seems like an amazing thing for a Western person, to become a monk first of all, then study. But I can also think of all, when I think of my teachers, I feel like I really don't know anything. So if we
Yeah.
think about all that we haven't done, all we can't do, we just defeat ourselves. We have to rejoice in the little that we can do, and then encourage ourselves to carry on with the faith that eventually it's just like the Buddha taught in the Dhammapada. One drop falling at a time gradually fills a huge urn, gradually fills the ocean.
Thank you. I really appreciate. Thank you so much, Tibet House.
Gelungsula,
Well, we
Gelungsula,
meditating now, no?
I think there's not a question, but it's a like more like a doubt from one of the participants in from our YouTube live channel.
Okay.
So I put up that message in our chat box. It says, "Are
Okay.
these from Bodhisattva Bhumi or Bodhisamya Langara or which other text?"
Oh yeah, from Joya Roy. Yeah, I mean the five paths, they're presented in different texts. I mean, they're referred to in, the Prajnaparamita Sutras repeatedly. Then they're also, commentated on in the Jansa, the grounds of bodhisattvas, Bodhisattva Bhumi. They also talk about there. Smilamkara talks about also in the Abhidharma text. They talk about many different texts they talk about. So this presentation in Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen's Paths and Ground text, it's kind of well, it's primarily according to the autonomous middle way school, um, but it draws, it's kind of a general presentation drawing from different texts. So the best, if you want to study these, the best place to start is the Grounds and Paths, and then yeah, I mean, you study all of Abhisamayalamkara is very helpful. It's interesting though. I was looking at the our Yiksha commentaries on the Abhisamayalamkara for like one section on the five paths, and there isn't one section where all five paths are described, and kind of compared in one place. That's why Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen wrote that text. But more like, in some chapters they'll talk a lot about the path of seeing, some will talk about the path of meditation, some will talk about the path of kind of accumulation, but there's no condensed presentation in one place in the Abhisamayalamkara. Shall we stop now, Luckman?
Yeah, Gelungsula, I think there's no more questions now, so we'll
Okay.
start with the dedication.
Oh, okay, sure. Let's yeah, just rejoice in all the merit we've created. Remember how we generated a positive motivation at the outset, yourself, the others in the group, and then think of all the beneficial things we've discussed during the session. At least try to remember, one useful thing you might have learned from this session, and remember, take that away, and try to hold on to that, not forget it. At least one, if not more. And then rejoice in all the merit created by other ordinary sentient beings like ourselves. doing, all kinds of different virtuous things. And rejoice in the merit of all of our own teachers, as well as the Dalai Lama and others, and all the Buddhist masters, now and into the distant past. And rejoice in all the merit they create. So all this oceans of merit we gather together, we dedicate, in brief, that every sentient being, or being of the hell realms, hungry animals, humans, gods, demigods, they're all free of every form of suffering and all the causes of suffering. And especially that we immediately see around us, suffering of suffering, like wars in Ukraine cause so much hardship to so many people all over the world, and famine at different places, natural disasters, not to mention, oppression, political, religious oppression, like of people in Tibet, and other places in the world. Loneliness, mental health problems, sickness, disease. May all beings be free from all these forms of suffering, and suffering of change, pervasive compounding suffering. Just the fact of being under the control of afflictive emotions, and especially ignorance. May all beings be free from that. And then for this purpose, may the Buddha Dharma, Buddhist teachings flourish, and all other spiritual teachings that bring benefit to sentient beings, may they flourish now and long into the future. And may all of our gurus, especially His Holiness Dalai Lama and others, have long and stable lives, and all their holy intentions be fulfilled exactly in accordance with their wishes. And then bring to mind any other prayers you'd like to make for yourself or for others. May all those your prayers be fulfilled in accordance with your wishes. And especially may Tibet House and all its activities of Geshe Dorje Damdala continue to flourish, and have all the supportive conditions needed to benefit countless sentient beings. Thank you all.
Thank you. With this, we have come to the end of today's program. And on behalf of Tibet House, I would like to thank our today's speaker, Venerable Gilektola, for an enlightening and a wonderful session today. So I thank you for sharing your time and your valuable knowledge with us. Thank you once again for a truly memorable session today. And I also want to thank to all the participants for your presence and participation. Thank you. Thank you, Ajay Pemala. Thank you, Joyla, for putting up your questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lemon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Limala. Thank you, Sumala.